Picture yourself stepping onto a luxury cruise, expecting nothing more than sunlit decks and endless ocean views, only to realize the ship has its own dark agenda. Shadows crawl where no light should reach. Passengers vanish mid-voyage, leaving their cabins eerily untouched. Music drifts from locked ballrooms as if someone or something is still celebrating behind those doors. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. These accounts have been investigated, double-checked, and pulled straight from real encounters shared by ordinary people who swore they lived through them. So dim the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because the ocean keeps its secrets, and some passengers never make it back. Don't forget to subscribe to Midnight Outcry, hit the bell icon, and leave a comment below. The ship may let you off, but the stories never will. Story 1. You know how sometimes you look back at a trip and realize you should have trusted your gut from the start? That's what this story is for me. A week-long cruise through the Caribbean that turned into something I still have trouble explaining out loud. My name's Alex, and at the time I was 28, a guy who had been running on fumes from work and desperately needed a break. I wasn't chasing adventure, just rest. My cousin Ryan, though, he was the opposite. He lived for noise, crowds, and whatever fun he could squeeze from the world. He's the reason I even booked the cruise. Ryan was tall, broad-shouldered, with a grin that made strangers open up to him in minutes. Where I kept to myself, he made friends at every bar, on every street. The cruise was his idea, a week where we could drink, laugh, and not think about our lives back home. I wanted that too, or at least I thought I did. We boarded the ship in Miami just as the sun was dropping, the air thick with salt and humidity. The excitement around us was contagious. Families with kids, couples in matching shirts, retirees smiling like this was their 15th voyage. Ryan fed off the energy immediately, waving at people as we moved through the decks, while I hung back, taking it all in. But something about walking that gangway made my chest feel heavier, like I wasn't stepping onto a vacation but into a trap I couldn't see yet. When we found our cabin, the disappointment was instant. It was one of those inside staterooms, no window, barely enough room to turn around. The air smelled faintly of bleach and damp carpet. I tossed my bag on the bed, and that's when I saw it, a folded note tucked halfway under the pillow. The paper was worn, edges frayed like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, the kind of scrawl you'd expect from someone writing fast and scared. Don't look for him. Don't answer if he knocks. He doesn't belong here. I stared at it for a long time. Ryan swore it wasn't his doing, laughed and said maybe the cleaning staff had a sense of humor. But his laugh didn't last long once he actually read the words. Something about it felt wrong. Not like a prank, but like a warning meant for us specifically. That night, we stood on the top deck as the ship pulled away from the port. Music was blasting, people were cheering, drinks were already in hand. Miami's lights stretched across the horizon until they blurred into a smear of gold. Ryan leaned over the railing, already talking about the casino and the girls he wanted to meet. I should have been caught up in it too. Instead, my eyes locked on the dock we were leaving behind. There was a man standing alone. Dark clothes, still as stone, head tilted slightly as if he was watching only me. He wasn't waving, wasn't saying goodbye like the others, just staring. And even as the distance grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes stayed fixed. Hours later, long after the shoreline disappeared, I caught sight of him again, on the lower deck, near the lifeboats. Except it wasn't possible. We were miles out at sea by then. The next morning, a sound woke me that I'll never forget. Knocks at our cabin door. Slow, steady, deliberate. Ryan was snoring, completely out cold, so it wasn't him. The knocks continued until I forced myself to stand and open the door. The hallway was empty. At breakfast later, when Ryan left the table to grab another plate, a woman slid into his empty seat. She looked to be in her 50s, sharp features, eyes that darted but never softened. She leaned close enough for me to smell the salt in her hair and whispered words that froze me where I sat. He never boarded. Remember that. Whatever you see, whatever he says, he never boarded this ship. Before I could respond, she stood and walked away, vanishing into the crowd like she had never been there at all. I told Ryan about the woman later, though I left out how her voice had crawled under my skin and stayed there. He laughed it off, said cruises attract all kinds of weirdos. He wasn't worried. But I noticed he checked the hall that night before turning in, like maybe the idea had gotten to him more than he wanted me to know. I couldn't shake the note, the knocks, or that woman's words. He never boarded. It replayed in my head every time I closed my eyes. I wanted to believe she was just a paranoid traveler, but paranoia doesn't leave handwritten notes tucked under pillows. On our second night, Ryan wanted to hit the casino. I wasn't in the mood, but he went anyway. I stayed back, trying to read in the cabin, though the air felt thick, heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Around midnight, I heard it again. Knocks, same rhythm as before. 3 slow, deliberate strikes on the door. I didn't move, my eyes fixed on the handle, waiting for it to turn. The knock stopped, but then I heard something worse. Footsteps. Soft, steady, pacing back and forth outside our cabin. Whoever it was, they weren't walking away. Finally, I mustered the courage to open the door. Nothing, just the hum of the ship's engines and the long, empty corridor. I stepped out, checking both directions. That's when I noticed something I swear hadn't been there earlier. Down the hall, on the floor, a trail of wet footprints. Bare feet, leading straight to our door, stopping right where I had been standing, and then vanishing into nothing. I backed into the cabin and locked the door. Ryan stumbled in around 2 a.m., drunk and buzzing from roulette. He saw my face and asked what was wrong, but when I told him, he shook his head, annoyed. "Man, you're letting this note crap get to you. You need to loosen up. This is supposed to be fun." I tried to explain, but he was already half asleep. The next morning, Ryan was gone. His bed was unmade, his stuff scattered, but no sign of him. I checked the buffet, the casino, the pool deck. Nothing. By noon, panic set in. I finally asked one of the crew members if they'd seen him. The young woman behind the desk checked her tablet, frowned, and looked back at me. "There's no passenger on this ship by that name." At first, I thought she was joking. But she wasn't. She even showed me the manifest. His name wasn't listed anywhere. It was like Ryan had never been there at all. I ran back to our cabin, convinced he was playing some elaborate prank. His clothes were still there, his wallet, even his shoes. But when I looked at the bed, I froze. The note was back on his pillow, the same jagged writing as before, only this time with new words beneath the first message. "Don't follow him. Don't ask about him. He doesn't belong here." That night, I saw Ryan again. Not in the casino, not at the bar, but through the narrow glass of a crew-only door at the end of the corridor. His face pale, his eyes sunken, his expression empty. He didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even blink. He just stood there, like he was waiting for me to open the door. And when I whispered his name, his lips moved, though no sound came out. He mouthed, "Let me in." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Ryan's face through that glass, his lips forming the same words over and over. "Let me in." By morning, my nerves were shot. I told myself I'd march straight to guest services, demand answers. But when I got there, the same woman from yesterday looked at me like I was crazy. "You're traveling alone, sir," she said firmly. "Your booking shows a single passenger." I almost yelled at her. "That's impossible. He checked in with me. He's been with me for days." She interrupted, voice colder now. "There's no record of him. Please don't cause a disturbance." The way she said it, flat and rehearsed, made my skin crawl. I stormed off, pulling out my phone to prove she was wrong. But when I opened my photos, something was off. Every picture I'd taken since boarding, the pool deck, the casino, the dining room, Ryan was missing. In shots where I swore he had been standing right next to me, there was only empty space. I dropped into a chair in the atrium, shaking. I kept scrolling, frantic, until I landed on one photo that nearly made me throw up. It was from the first night, when we had asked a server to take a picture of us on the promenade. In that photo, I was smiling with my drink, and beside me was a blur, like a human shape made of water, distorted and dripping, barely resembling a face. And behind us, in the reflection of the glass, stood the same woman who had warned me, the one who whispered, "He never boarded." That evening, I tried to avoid the cabin, convinced that room was cursed. I lingered in the theater, watched a show I barely processed, then sat in the nearly empty lounge until closing. By the time I dragged myself back to the hallway, the ship was dead quiet. And then I heard it, knocking, not from my cabin, but from every cabin around me. One door after another, slow and deliberate, like a signal rippling down the corridor. My hands shook as I slid the keycard into my lock. When I pushed the door open, the room was freezing, condensation dripping down the mirror like the walls were sweating. On my bed sat Ryan, or at least something wearing Ryan's face. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his skin, water dripping onto the carpet. He looked up at me with glassy eyes and spoke in a voice that echoed like it came from underwater. "You left me down there." I stumbled back, choking on fear. "What are you talking about?" His lips curled into a warped smile. "They pulled me below deck. They showed me what I really am. And now, it's your turn." As he stood, water pooled at his feet, seeping outward, reaching for me. The lights flickered. For a split second, the cabin wasn't a cabin anymore. It was a submerged room, water pressing against the walls, the carpet replaced with an endless black tide. And Ryan was gone, but the wet footprints remained, leading straight to the bathroom door. And from behind it, a voice whispered, "Let me out." I didn't want to open that bathroom door. Every instinct in me screamed to leave it shut, to run, to abandon the cabin entirely. But the whisper came again, clearer this time, echoing through the thin wood. "Let me out." My hand trembled on the handle. I backed away instead, heart pounding so loud I could hear blood rushing in my ears. Then the knocking began, slow, steady, like fists pounding from the inside. I bolted. I didn't even think about what I'd left behind. I just ran down the corridor barefoot, my wet socks slapping against the floor. The hall felt longer than it should have, stretching endlessly, the overhead lights dimming in sequence as I passed under them. When I finally reached the stairwell, I pushed the door so hard it slammed against the wall. I leaned over the railing, gasping. That's when I realized the stairwell went down much farther than it should have. Deck after deck after deck. More levels than existed on the ship. The air down there shimmered with moisture, fog rising upward as if the ocean itself breathed below. A sound drifted up the stairwell. Music. Soft, distorted. A ballroom waltz played on warped strings. And underneath it, laughter. Dozens of voices clinking glasses in celebration. I clutched the railing so tight, my knuckles went white. "No," I whispered. "This isn't real." But then I saw movement. A figure climbing the stairs. Slow, deliberate, each step splashing with seawater. His clothes were heavy, dripping, his head tilted back unnaturally far, as though his neck had broken. His face was pale, waterlogged, lips split open in a grin. It was Ryan, not the Ryan I knew, but the drowned version. "You left me," he said again, voice rattling with water. "Now you'll stay." I stumbled backward, tripping up the steps, desperate to get away. But when I shoved through the door back onto the passenger deck, it wasn't the hallway I entered. It was the ballroom. Chandeliers swayed above a grand dance floor. Guests in evening wear glided across polished wood, their clothes soaked through, dripping with every step. Their eyes were milky, their skin pale as wax. Some of them still held champagne flutes, raising them in silent toasts. And at the center of it all stood Ryan, perfectly dry now, smiling like nothing had ever happened. He extended his hand toward me. "They're waiting for you." The drowned guests stopped dancing. Slowly, all at once, they turned to face me. Their smiles widened. Their arms opened as if in welcome. I froze, my throat closing in terror. There was no exit, no door, just me, Ryan, and 100 lifeless passengers pressing in closer and closer. And then I heard it again, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere deep below. The knocking, one door after another. And this time, they weren't asking to be let out. They were letting me in. I don't know if it was adrenaline, madness, or some primal instinct to survive, but I ran. I shoved through that crowd of drenched dancers, their cold, clammy skin brushing against mine as they tried to pull me into their embrace. They didn't resist much, almost as if they knew I was only running deeper into their trap. Ryan's laughter followed me, echoing from every corner of the ballroom. "You'll never leave. You already belong to us." I reached what should have been the far wall, but there was no door, no exit. Just another line of tall windows, glass fogged with condensation. I banged my fists against the glass until my skin split. No sound escaped. No cracks appeared. When I turned back, the entire ballroom had gone silent. The dancers were still, their heads cocked at unnatural angles, watching me. Ryan stepped forward, his shoes leaving no sound on the wet floor. He held something in his hand. My cabin keycard. "I told you," he said softly. "You're one of us now. That room you checked into, it was never yours. You were never meant to be here." And then the chandeliers above flickered, sputtered, and went dark. The next light came from beneath my feet. The polished wood floor had turned transparent, shifting into rippling black water. Through it, I saw hundreds of faces just beneath the surface, bloated, pale, eyes wide and staring up at me. Their mouths opened in unison, releasing a wave of bubbles that shimmered like dying stars. The floor cracked. Cold water rushed between the boards, soaking my legs. I screamed and scrambled backward, but it was no use. The ballroom was filling, fast. As the water rose, the dancers didn't drown. They swayed with the flood. Movements fluid, unnatural, their smiles never faltering. Ryan lifted his head, eyes dark as the depths. "Midnight boarding," he whispered. "You're the final passenger." The water reached my chest, then my neck. I clawed for air, thrashing, screaming, but every face I saw in that rising flood was smiling, welcoming me down. The last thing I remember before the water filled my lungs was Ryan's hand pressing against my head, pushing me under, and when the world went black, I felt it. Relief, like I had always been meant to join them. They never found my body, at least not officially. The ship docked, passengers disembarked, and my name was simply marked as no record of boarding. My family still thinks I never stepped on that cruise. But if you ever find yourself at sea, in a cabin that feels just a little too cold, with knocking you can't quite explain, don't open the door, because I'll be on the other side, waiting. Story 2. Did you see him get on the ship? That was the last question I remember hearing before everything went wrong. My name is Ethan Clark, 32, a travel photographer from Seattle. I booked this cruise to escape a long winter and finish a series on ocean sunsets. But I hadn't counted on meeting someone who shouldn't exist. I'm usually rational, grounded, the type to trust my eyes, yet here I was doubting every reflection in the glass. It started innocuously. On the first night, I noticed a man in a crisp black suit wandering the promenade deck. No name tag, no luggage, no one acknowledging him. At first I assumed he was a new crew member or some passenger who liked solitude. But he never interacted with anyone except me. Every time I turned my camera, the man seemed closer, yet when I blinked, he was gone. By the second night, whispers started. Not audible words, more like murmurs carried by the ship's hum. But I could swear they echoed from the dark corners of the corridors. Guests laughed in the lounges. Crew called out orders, but beneath it all, a soft, insistent humming, almost melodic, followed me. The man appeared again by the glass railing, overlooking the ocean, staring straight into my lens, expressionless. "Are you supposed to be here?" I asked, under my breath. No reply, just that same unnatural calm. Dinner in the main dining hall felt off. Plates clinked, silverware scraped, conversation flowed. But I noticed a pattern. Guests who nodded toward him or exchanged polite words disappeared the next morning. Crew members pretended nothing happened. One night, I saw the empty chair he had occupied at my table. It hadn't been removed or reassigned, just gone. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was sleep deprived. Maybe seasickness played tricks. But cameras don't lie, and my photos captured him standing in spots where no one else had been moments before. One picture even showed him partially reflected in the window, but the outside deck was empty. Then came the mid-cruise announcement, "For tonight's evening promenade, please follow all instructions carefully." Simple, sterile. But my stomach dropped, because I hadn't seen that announcement before, and no one else seemed to react. I decided to track him, not confrontationally, just observation. Every corridor I checked led to dead ends or repeated hallways, as if the ship itself was shifting. The man was always waiting at the end, motionless, pale under the deck lights, watching me. A subtle sound made me freeze, a soft tap, tap, tap from behind the doors of an empty lounge. I turned, camera ready, but the room was deserted. The hum returned, louder, almost chanting my name, "Ethan." I realized, with rising horror, that the ship had patterns. Those who saw him, those who acknowledged him, never returned to their cabins. And now, it wasn't just him I was tracking. Something inside the ship was alive, aware, guiding people toward him. If you're listening to this, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. I made my way to the rear deck, hoping the open sea would reset reality, but the man was there, at the very edge, staring out at nothing, hands clasped behind his back. And when I blinked, he was one step closer, smiling faintly. Not a human smile, something else. And I realized he hadn't boarded the ship. Yet, he was everywhere. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time my eyes closed, I saw him at the railing, just beyond the glass, silhouette sharp against the moonlight reflecting off the ocean. I kept the cabin door locked, double-checked it, yet a soft scrape on the metal handle woke me twice. Nothing was there when I looked. I decided to follow the ship's routine the next day, blending in, pretending to enjoy the sun deck and buffet. But he kept appearing at the edge of my vision, standing perfectly still, like a shadow that shouldn't exist. Passengers would pass through him, and he remained untouched by light, by sound, by their presence. By evening, I noticed subtle changes. A door that usually led to a maintenance closet opened onto a hallway I'd never seen before. The carpet was soaked, smelling faintly of brine and rust. I entered cautiously, camera raised, only to find my own reflection in the brass handrail, except my eyes weren't mine. They were wide, terrified, and I felt a memory that wasn't mine. A ship, a storm, a screaming crowd, faces pressed against cabin doors. The man appeared at the far end of the hallway. His posture was rigid, unnervingly calm, his gaze locked on me. I tried to step back, but the corridor seemed to stretch impossibly, growing darker, swallowing the edges of the light. I could hear whispers, hundreds of voices, but none recognizable. Just a chorus of absence, calling my name in tiny, urgent syllables. I stopped by a door marked 7B, which hadn't been on the deck plan. Something compelled me to look inside. The room was immaculate, but the air thrummed with presence. A glass sat on the table, filled with dark liquid, and the faint smell of alcohol made my stomach churn. A small note beside it read, "Drink and join us." I backed away slowly, heart hammering. Shadows shifted in the corners, fleeting glimpses of passengers from the previous nights, heads tilted unnaturally, gazing at me. The floor creaked with no one stepping, and then I heard it clearly, a whisper, not a murmur, not in the hum, but sharp and near. "You'll come." I rushed toward the main hall, hoping to see a familiar face, someone to confirm my sanity. But every passenger I passed ignored me, or perhaps didn't exist. The man wasn't chasing, he didn't need to. The ship itself was bending toward him, corridors looping, lights flickering, subtly guiding me forward. In the theater, the crew rehearsed for a show, yet their movements were slightly off, robotic, puppet-like. No one acknowledged my presence. The whispers grew louder here, and I realized the crew's eyes flicked toward him occasionally, almost reverently. A curtain fluttered, revealing a doorway that shouldn't have been there, and I glimpsed him again, closer, smiling faintly. I ducked into a side corridor, pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. The faint sound of laughter echoed from above. A child's voice, high-pitched and distant, called out, "Come play with us!" But when I ran toward it, the corridor looped, and I was back where I started. Everything on the ship was designed to draw me to him. I realized that this was no ordinary passenger. He was a gatekeeper, a lure, and I had already been marked. By the third night, sleep was impossible. I tried to stay with other passengers, hoping proximity to someone real would anchor me. But every group I approached seemed like a mirage. Smiles frozen, conversations repeating like broken recordings, as if they were rehearsed. I caught glimpses of him in reflections, always closer than before, even when I turned away. I took the stairs to the observation deck, hoping the open air and vast ocean would reset my senses. Instead, the hum grew louder, almost vocal now. Waves crashed outside, but beneath them was something deeper, a resonance, a rhythm guiding me forward. And there he was at the end of the deck, perfectly still, hands clasped, head tilted, in silent invitation. I stumbled into the lounge, empty, save for the faint smell of cigarette smoke and salt. A newspaper lay on a table, dated not for today, but decades ago. The headline read, "Passenger vanishes during midnight voyage." My hands shook as I picked it up. Every article referenced the same man, the same suit, the same calm presence. But the photos were blurred, impossible, faces melting into the background. I realized the terrifying truth. He hadn't changed over decades. He wasn't just a passenger. He was part of the ship's memory, or perhaps its consciousness. Every lost person, every vanished guest was drawn by him, folded into the vessel itself. A muffled noise drew my attention. From behind a closed service door, a soft tapping began. Tap, tap, tap. I moved closer. Through the narrow crack, I saw him again, holding a glass, eyes glinting with something inhuman. The faint hum became whispers. "It's your turn. You belong with us." I backed away, heart pounding. The hallway warped, walls elongating, doors appearing where none had been. I ducked into a corridor marked service access, hoping for a shortcut back to the main deck. But it twisted impossibly, folding over itself, stretching like a maze. And then I saw movement. Figures stepping out of empty cabins, glistening with seawater, faces pale, eyes glazed, all reaching toward me with silent, dripping hands. I ran, my shoes sloshing in water that had no source. He followed at a distance, unhurried, confident, as if the ship itself carried him. Every door I tried was locked or led me in circles. And then a door swung open on its own, revealing a large ballroom illuminated by chandeliers. Music played, a distorted waltz, and shadows danced across the walls, not moving to the rhythm, but to him. I pressed against the wall, trying to find an escape. A hand grazed my shoulder. I spun. No one was there. The whispers intensified, echoing in my skull, blending with the music. My flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of drowned figures smiling from the corners. And then I noticed it. A reflection in the polished floor of the ballroom. My own reflection was standing with him, smiling, holding a glass I hadn't touched. The thought hit me with icy certainty. Once you see him, once you acknowledge him, you're already part of the ship. I had no choice but to keep moving. Every corridor, every door seemed alive, shifting subtly, bending toward him. The ballroom lingered in my mind, a reminder that the ship itself was a trap, every inch designed to guide me back to him. I found myself in the theater. The seats were empty, yet the stage was set. Curtains swayed even though no wind entered. Faint clapping echoed from nowhere. I crept forward, hoping to find a side door out. As I neared the stage, I caught a glimpse of him in the reflection of a brass railing. His smile was wider than humanly possible, his eyes blackened at the edges, glinting like obsidian. I backed up, colliding with a chair. The soft, metallic clatter reverberated. From behind, I heard footsteps, slow, measured, not my own. The theater doors slammed shut. Heart pounding, I ran toward the balcony exit, only to find it leading to a staircase that ended abruptly in darkness. I tried shouting for help, but my voice echoed back distorted, as if the ship swallowed sound. A note fluttered down from the railing above. "We've been waiting." I recognized the handwriting instantly. It matched the previous vanished passengers. Names, dates, all scribbled in haste, overlapping each other. Some names were crossed out. Mine was at the bottom, freshly penned. A low creaking drew my eyes upward. He descended slowly, as though gravity bowed to him, carrying a silver tray with a single glass. The liquid inside shimmered with a darkness that swallowed light. The air around him smelled like brine and rust and fear. I stumbled backward into the shadows, the floorboards beneath me, giving way to shallow water. Drenched, I looked up to see him standing on a raised section of the stage, tall, immovable, as if he belonged to the ship itself. The whispers around me were louder now, chanting my name. I fumbled for my flashlight. Its beam cut through the darkness, landing on the figures of passengers who had disappeared over the last few nights. They stood in the aisles, pale and wet, eyes glazed, reaching for him in silent adoration. The man raised his glass, motioning toward me, and the room seemed to pulse in response. In a split second, I realized that he didn't need to chase. He didn't need to grab. The ship, the water, the shadows, everything carried me toward him. Resistance was meaningless. I backed into the orchestra pit. Water lapped at my knees, freezing cold. Behind me, a door appeared out of nowhere, slightly ajar, beckoning. Was it real? Was it escape or another trap? My mind screamed to choose, and I dove through. The corridor beyond was narrow, tilting slightly. My flashlight flickered, showing glimpses of distorted cabins, identical to the ones I had passed before. Every step echoed unnaturally, overlapping with the soft click of invisible heels behind me. And there he was, closer than ever, smiling, holding the glass still. The ship itself groaned. The walls warped, bending toward him. I ran, knowing that no matter where I turned, every path, every reflection, every flicker of light was pulling me toward him. I had run farther than I thought possible, yet every turn brought me back to the same spot. The corridor bent impossibly, folding in on itself like the ship was alive, breathing. The whispers had grown into words now, a chorus of passengers, half drowned, half shadow. "Join us. It's your turn. You belong here." Ahead, a cabin door, plain, unmarked, stood slightly ajar. I hesitated, but instinct told me to step inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world shifted. The walls dissolved into black water, stretching infinitely in all directions. I floated, or maybe fell. I couldn't tell. The hum from before became a roar, vibrating inside my skull. He appeared then, materializing from the water itself. No steps, no sound, only presence. His smile was impossibly wide, his eyes hollowed and infinite, reflecting the endless ocean. The tray with the glass floated in front of him, unhanded, shimmering with darkness that seemed to consume the very air. I tried to speak, to reason, but my voice vanished. The reflections of lost passengers swirled around me, some reaching out, others staring, mouthing silent warnings I couldn't understand. One face, freshly familiar, caught my attention. The reflection of myself, smiling, holding the same glass. I recoiled. It mimicked my movements, laughing silently. "Don't resist," he whispered, voice rippling through the water and my bones. "You're already part of this. You always were." I turned to flee, but the corridor behind me no longer existed. The water extended in all directions, doors emerging from the depths, chandeliers floating upside down above me. The ship itself was a labyrinth of the drowned, the vanished, and him. Every path, every exit led me closer to him. In a moment of clarity, I realized the truth. The ship was not just a vessel. It was a collector, a predator, and he, its eternal steward. Every missing passenger, every strange event, every distorted corridor, they were part of its memory. The glass he held was not wine. It was the key. Accept it, and you were folded into the ship forever. My reflection raised the glass to me. I screamed and flung myself backward into the infinite darkness. The cold water closed over me. The hum became unbearable, resonating through every nerve, every thought. And then, silence. Somewhere, a whisper, faint but certain. You'll never leave. And as my vision blurred, I realized I was staring at the endless ballroom, the drowned passengers, the impossible corridors, and him, waiting, smiling, always waiting, y'always waiting. Story 3. I had never been seasick in my life, but that night the waves seemed to move inside me. The ship's engines thrummed with a monotone vibration that seeped into my bones. From the railing of Deck 9, I watched the endless horizon, the moon barely a silver scar on the water. Something about this cruise felt wrong. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 32, from Seattle. I work in maritime logistics, ordinary, routine, the kind of job that keeps you grounded. But I'd come on this cruise to escape, to reset after a brutal year. Quiet, cautious, a little too self-conscious around strangers, I thought I'd enjoy a solo trip. That hope vanished the moment I boarded. The ship smelled faintly of chlorine and old varnish, the decks polished to an unnatural shine. Crew members smiled too widely, their eyes darting strangely. In the dining hall, the laughter of passengers felt hollow, echoing longer than it should. The announcement system crackled in bursts of static before a friendly voice directed guests to the midnight lounge. I shook my head and went back to my cabin. At 11:45 p.m., I heard the first whisper, soft, almost polite, coming from the corridor. Ethan. My name. I froze. No one was there. The lights flickered, and a draft slithered along the hallway, carrying a faint scent of salt and something metallic. I told myself it was nerves, maybe a prank. I checked my cabin door. It was locked. Yet beneath it, a soft rhythmic tapping began, not like a knock, more like fingernails drumming in deliberate timing. I wanted to call the front desk, but the phone line was dead. Compelled and terrified, I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the corridor. The tapping stopped. Silence fell, so complete that the hum of the engines vanished. The hallway stretched further than it should have. Doors warped slightly, numbers inconsistent. Cabin 912 appeared 3 times before fading altogether. A shadow moved at the far end, too fast to be human. A tray glimmered in the dim light, a single glass filled with dark liquid. No one else was around, but I could hear breathing, low and synchronous with mine. I stumbled back, then froze. The shadow stepped forward and I saw it clearly. A crew member, uniform pristine, face obscured by shadow, eyes glinting. You dropped this, the figure said, voice soft, almost apologetic. My throat tightened. I had dropped nothing. I hadn't moved. The glass wobbled slightly in his hand, and I saw the liquid inside ripple unnaturally, reflecting impossible shapes. Behind him, the walls shimmered as if they were water themselves. I knew, in a way I couldn't explain, that anyone who accepted that drink didn't return. My flashlight caught a reflection in the polished wall. The hallway behind me stretched infinitely. The shadow followed, unblinking. I turned, and there were whispers again, calling names of passengers who had vanished in previous nights, faintly repeating my name. I backed into a side stairwell, hoping to find a safe deck. The stairs descended farther than any blueprint indicated, metal steps slick with moisture. I could hear the soft clink of glass somewhere above, the shadow's footsteps synchronized with the thrum of the ship. I stumbled, nearly falling into cold, shallow water pooling on the stairs. My mind screamed to leave, yet every instinct was paralyzed. I realized then the ship wasn't just moving through water, it was alive, aware, and hunting. I gripped the railing as the stairs seemed to stretch endlessly downward. Each step echoed hollowly, a metronome of dread. My chest burned, every breath shallow, yet something compelled me forward. The metallic tang of water filled the air, sharper now, and beneath it, a faint undertone, like laughter drowned in waves. The flashlight flickered, and I saw movement below. Shapes, blurred and indistinct, as if passengers were suspended mid-step, frozen yet moving. The floor glistened with something slick, reflecting dim overhead lights that warped and shimmered unnaturally. My reflection in the wet metal wall wasn't quite mine. It blinked when I didn't, tilted its head, grinned. I tried calling out, voice cracking, but only a gurgle echoed back. The shadow had followed, but now it wasn't static. It moved fluidly, gliding across the waterlogged stairwell, no visible steps. The tray with the dark liquid floated alongside him, perfectly balanced. I didn't understand how. I turned a corner, and the corridor behind me had disappeared. Instead of the stairwell, I found a long hallway lined with mirrors. Each mirror showed a different part of the ship, the lounge, the decks, cabins, but distorted. In one, a passenger waved, but their face was melted, unrecognizable. In another, a crew member bowed repeatedly, eyes hollow. A soft whisper grazed my ear. "Why don't you join us?" My pulse jumped. The voice came from every direction at once, overlapping, impossible. I spun in place, seeing movement behind each mirror reflection, figures shifting, almost transparent, following me. The shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, still holding the floating glass. I wanted to run, but the floor now seemed to undulate, waves forming beneath my feet. My shoes slipped. Each time I fell forward, the corridor extended further, infinite and unending. I ducked into what appeared to be a cabin, cabin 912, though this number had been repeated thrice before. Inside, the walls were slick with water, and music began faintly, a warped waltz as though from an old gramophone. The shadow entered behind me, still silent, moving without sound. I found a small table and, desperate, tried to barricade the door with the mattress. It slid through my hands as if it were liquid. Then the glass floated onto the table by itself, droplets of condensation glinting in the dim light. My heart raced. Accepting it was unthinkable, yet refusing it seemed futile. I noticed something written faintly on the table. "Those who drink never leave." My hand shook as I traced the words. The shadow tilted his head, expression unreadable. Behind him, the walls began to ripple, revealing glimpses of the ship's hidden depths, endless corridors, flooded cabins, passengers suspended in water, faces twisted into eternal grins. I stumbled back, tripping over the wet floor. The glass tipped slightly, almost spilling, but the shadow steadied it with a thoughtless gesture. Then he whispered, almost casually, "Your turn." The waltz swelled, distorted and haunting. I realized the cabin itself was not real. It was part of the ship's memory, a trap set to ensnare the curious and the cautious alike. The weight of the ship pressed in, as though the walls themselves wanted me to drink, to belong. I reached for my flashlight, flicked it around desperately. A small reflection caught my eye, my own face, pale and wide-eyed, staring back from the corner mirror, holding the glass. I stumbled, screamed, and turned, only to find the hallway stretching infinitely again. The shadow advanced. I ran, slipping in the water pooling on the floor, every step pulling me deeper into the impossible ship. Every reflection, every whisper, every distorted corridor told me the same thing. This cruise was a predator, and I was prey. I had no choice but to move forward. The waltz, the shadows, the glass, all followed. I finally collapsed against a wet wall, gasping, trying to make sense of the nightmare I'd stumbled into. The waltz lingered in the air, warped and haunting, echoing off the water-slick walls. My flashlight flickered erratically, and in those brief stutters, I glimpsed figures standing at the ends of hallways, passengers I recognized from earlier, or maybe I thought I did. Their faces were pale, eyes glassy, smiles too wide. I pressed forward, each step cautious, my shoes squelching in the thin layer of water. Somewhere ahead, a faint murmur, laughter, or cries. I couldn't tell. The corridor split suddenly, forming a T. One path descended toward a dimly lit stairwell, the other stretched toward a cabin deck that seemed familiar. But familiar in a wrong way, as if memory itself had been twisted. I chose the cabin deck. My hand brushed a railing, slick and cold. The names on the doors were those of people I had seen on the ship earlier that day. The numbers repeated, shifted, cabin 612, then 612 again, then 614. The sequence made no sense. It was as if the ship itself was alive, rearranging to trap me. Suddenly, a door ahead creaked open, slow and deliberate. A dim light spilled into the hall. From within, a passenger stepped out. At first, I thought it was an actual crew member, but the eyes, they were empty, hollow, no recognition, no life. He raised a hand in greeting, slow, unnatural. I stumbled back, my flashlight slipping from my grip. The beam landed on another figure emerging from the next cabin. And another. They moved in unison, gliding toward me, silent but inevitable. My pulse hammered in my ears. I backed into a corner, tripping over a pool of water. Then I heard it, a whisper, unmistakably close, almost at my ear. "Drink, join us, stay." I spun. No one was there. My heart screamed, my mind a jumble of disbelief and terror. The floating glass from earlier drifted down the corridor, stopping inches from my feet. The condensation glistened in the dim light. It was the same dark liquid, cold and inviting, impossible. I recoiled, knowing instinctively what would happen if I accepted. Somewhere behind me, footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate, yet with no rhythm. I turned, no one in sight. The hallway seemed endless, twisting, turning, the reflections in the wet walls duplicating infinitely. I was walking in circles, yet moving forward at the same time. I finally found a stairwell, half submerged in water. The steps were slick, metal groaning under each tentative step. I climbed carefully, trying not to fall, every movement sending ripples across the surface. The further I ascended, the more the faint music grew, distorted and layered, like multiple instruments playing the same song slightly out of sync. At the top, a familiar hallway stretched before me, but the doors were ajar. Peeking inside, I saw the passengers again. Some appeared drowned, some just pale, all moving in slow mechanical loops, raising glasses, staring into nothing, smiling. I realized with a gut-punching certainty, these weren't just hallucinations. They were trapped, like me, forever part of the ship's hidden world. Then the whisper returned, louder, insistent. "It's time." I backed away, saw my flashlight on the floor. The beam flickered on something, a note, soaked and stuck to the metal. I read it. "The ship chooses who stays. Don't resist, or you'll join them." My stomach turned. I knew this was no ordinary cruise. Every laugh, every clink of glasses, every waltz I had heard earlier. It was all a lure, a trap. And now I was part of it, walking a thin line between freedom and joining the endless parade of lost passengers. I took a deep breath, fighting panic. knowing the next choice I made could determine whether I survived or became another pale, grinning face in the reflections. And then I heard it, the softest step behind me. I didn't dare turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the stairwell behind me stretched like it had no end, and the sound of those slow, deliberate steps grew closer. My hands shook as I gripped the wet railing, the metal biting cold into my skin. The ship felt alive, breathing, almost pressing against me, guiding me towards something. The corridor ahead opened into a vast, dimly lit chamber I didn't recognize. Chandeliers swayed faintly, though there was no wind, and the wooden floorboards were slick with seawater. The faint waltz had returned, layered over itself, echoing from every direction. I realized I could see the reflections of the passengers I had glimpsed before, standing at the edges, waiting. And then he appeared. The shadow. Not human anymore, not entirely. He moved gracefully, almost floating above the waterlogged floor. Glass in hand, dark liquid shimmering as if alive. His grin stretched wider than it should, eyes glinting with something inhuman. "You're almost ready," he said, voice smooth, curling around my mind. "You've seen enough to understand. Will you join us?" I backed away, stumbling, water splashing over my shoes. Each step seemed heavier, like the floor was pulling me down. Behind him, the passengers mirrored him perfectly, raising glasses, their eyes hollow, faces pale, grinning in silent invitation. I fumbled with my flashlight, trying to see a path forward. The walls were moving, or maybe I was. Mirrors lined the chamber now, reflecting infinite corridors, endless stairwells, rooms I had never seen before. Every reflection contained a variation of me, holding the glass, tilting its head. My stomach churned. I remembered something, the small, water-soaked note I had found earlier. "The ship chooses who stays. Don't resist, or you'll join them." I didn't want to resist. I didn't want to stay. Yet something deep, primal, told me I might not have a choice. The shadow stepped closer. The liquid in his glass shimmered, almost beckoning. My hand twitched, heart hammering, every nerve screaming. I could feel the pull, not just from him, but from the entire ship, as if it were alive, wanting me to succumb. Suddenly, the music shifted. A cacophony of distorted notes, laughter, whispers overlapping. I realized the passengers weren't just trapped. They were feeding the ship, their existence maintaining this endless, impossible realm. And the shadow, he was its agent, its guide. I stumbled backward, tripping into a pool of water. My flashlight slid across the floor, beam dancing across the walls. And then I saw it. A small hatch, almost invisible beneath the water, labeled Maintenance Access. Could it be an escape or another trap? My instincts told me it was my only chance. I crawled toward it, ignoring the whispers, the reflections, the way the shadows seemed to stretch toward me. My hand found the handle, slippery, cold. I pulled with every ounce of strength I had. The hatch swung open to reveal a narrow, dark passage. I didn't hesitate. I dove in, crawling through the tight space, the water rising around me. Behind me, faint footsteps echoed, growing fainter as if the ship allowed me, for now. When I finally emerged, I was back near the crew corridor, drenched, shaking, but alive. The waltz had stopped. The reflections, the shadow, the floating glasses, all gone. The ship hummed normally, as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. Every creak, every drip, every distant sound of the ocean reminded me it was still there, waiting, watching. And one day, it would claim another curious passenger. I sank to the floor, exhausted, flashlight flickering. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. And I knew one thing for certain: I would never forget the faces, the glass, the endless corridors of that impossible ship. And somewhere in the dark, faint but unmistakable, The softest of whispers echoed, "See you soon." I thought I had escaped. My clothes clung to my skin, drenched and cold, hair plastered to my forehead. I stumbled to the nearest lounge, hoping to find some sign of normalcy. Other passengers, crew, anything. The hum of the engines was there, the occasional clink of dishes from the dining hall, but something was off. Too quiet, too orderly. Then I saw him. Not the shadow itself, not fully, but a reflection in the polished brass railing. He was there, grinning, just behind me, though I knew no one else was in the hall. My pulse spiked. I spun around. Empty. The reflection stared back at me, though impossible, distorted, eyes brighter than any human's. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. I shouted, called out for crew for help, but only my own voice returned, echoed in the high ceiling. I made my way toward the deck exit. Moonlight glinted off the water outside, waves lapping softly. Relief rushed in. Freedom was steps away. But as I approached the rail, the deck stretched impossibly long. Cabins appeared where none should be. Doors opened. Figures peered out, smiling, beckoning. My stomach dropped. The ship was shifting, rearranging itself. Escape wasn't a straight path. And then I heard it, unmistakable. The soft, sinister laugh. From behind, from below, from everywhere at once. The shadow was not following, it was part of the ship. It had never left. It never would. I ran, desperate, heart-hammering, trying to find a lifeboat, a ladder, anything. But each corner I turned, each stair I climbed, led me back into the same eerie corridors, the same pale faces, the same waltz echoing faintly beneath the water's surface. I realized then that the ship did not just want to trap me, it wanted me to forget, to wander endlessly until I became part of its haunted memory. And even as panic surged, a horrifying clarity hit me. Some doors, some halls, would always be locked to me, until the moment I joined the others. My flashlight flickered, dying. Darkness swallowed everything. I pressed on blindly, the echo of laughter and soft whispers filling my mind. And in the distance, faint but undeniable, I heard a toast, glasses clinking, music faintly resuming. To our newest passenger, I froze. My chest tightened. The wave of cold dread surged over me, and in that instant, I understood there was no real escape. Not ever. The ship would wait, patient and eternal, until curiosity, or some fatal mistake, brought another soul into its endless, drowning dance. I staggered forward, swallowed by darkness. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a pale hand, lifted in a silent toast. And then silence, except for the softest whisper echoing in my head, "Welcome home." Story 4. You don't want to go near the upper deck at night. The words slipped from the bartender's lips almost as an afterthought, but his eyes stayed fixed on me, wary. I laughed it off at first, assuming he was joking. I had booked this cruise to forget the chaos of my life on land, not to stumble into some horror story. My name is Lucas Hargrove, 32, freelance photographer from Boston. I'd spent the past 6 months living out of suitcases, chasing gigs that barely paid, and this cruise, luxury liner Sea Whisperer, was supposed to be a week of calm, of oceans and sunsets, of normalcy. I'm introverted, sure, but curious, and curiosity, as I was about to learn, can be dangerous. The first day was perfect. The sun painted gold across the waves. The ship's teak decks gleamed, and crew members moved with rehearsed precision. But at night, when most guests had retired to their cabins, I started noticing the patterns, the subtle things that didn't add up. Doors on the upper deck sometimes opened by themselves. Shadows moved against the light of the lanterns, always at the edges of my vision. And then the music started. Faint at first, like wind through a vent, then louder, as if an entire orchestra played on the deck above. But every time I went to check, the deck was empty. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just nerves, the isolation at sea. But that night, Leaning over the railing to watch the phosphorescent waves, I saw it, a single figure, far on the upper deck, cloaked in shadow. It waved at me, or so I thought. My stomach sank as I realized the figure didn't move naturally. I blinked. It was gone. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the ship sounded louder, sharper. I kept thinking about the figure, and the bartender's warning repeated in my mind like a mantra. You don't want to go near the upper deck at night. By morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. The sunlight was blinding, the waves sparkling like diamonds, and the other passengers seemed perfectly normal. Families laughed on the promenade, couples sipped champagne by the pool. Everything felt safe, until I noticed something strange about the upper deck staircase. It led nowhere. Or rather, it led to the same railing, the same empty stretch of deck, but sometimes, when I glanced at it from a certain angle, I swore the staircase continued, twisting impossibly upward, disappearing into mist. I tried talking to other passengers about it. You're imagining things, one man chuckled. The ship's huge. You'll get lost if you think you see ghosts everywhere. But the way he said it, too eager, almost rehearsed. I shook it off and went to lunch, but unease gnawed at me. Later that afternoon, I wandered near the upper deck again, camera in hand, documenting the sunset. And there it was, a faint figure, standing at the far edge, framed by the setting sun. This time, I could make out the details. Tall, thin, face obscured by a hooded coat, hands folded in front. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, waiting. I raised my camera to take a picture. The shutter clicked and the figure vanished instantly, as though it had never been there. A chill ran down my spine. I felt like I was being watched from every direction, the hum of the ship growing louder, the rhythm of the waves matching my heartbeat. I took a deep breath, convincing myself to leave, but a faint whisper reached my ears, carried by the wind. Come up, we're waiting. I spun around, empty deck, my pulse raced. And that's when I noticed the door at the far end of the promenade. A door I'd never seen before. Painted black, unmarked, almost blending into the ship's steel hull. It creaked slightly, like it had been nudged by someone or something. I should have walked away. I should have ignored it. But curiosity won. I stepped closer, and the door swung open on its own. I hesitated at the threshold. The door led to a narrow corridor, dimly lit by flickering wall sconces. The scent hit me first. Damp wood, rust, and something coppery, like blood. I could hear the ship's hum fading, replaced by a low, constant murmur, almost like voices carried from far away. "Hello?" I whispered, though I knew no one would answer. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with doors on either side, identical and unmarked. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows, but that faint glow was enough to reveal footprints. Wet, dark, glistening, leading deeper inside. I forced myself to follow. Each step made the floorboards groan, echoing unnaturally, like the ship itself was alive and watching. My camera felt heavy in my hand. I kept glancing behind me, half expecting the door to vanish, but it stayed there, silent, waiting. Halfway down the hall, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping between doors, faster than a human could move. I spun around. Nothing. Just walls, dim lights, and that creeping sense of being observed. Then, a laugh. A single hollow, brittle laugh that didn't echo naturally. It sounded like it came from everywhere at once. I froze, heart hammering. I took another step forward, and the doors began to open slowly, one by one. Figures emerged. Not fully formed, not fully human. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, mouths stretched into silent screams, but they moved as if dancing to some rhythm only they could hear. Each step they took made the floor beneath them drip with water that smelled of salt and iron. I stumbled backward, almost tripping. My flashlight flickered. When it came back, one figure stood closer than it should have been. Tall, hooded, waiting silently. It raised a hand, pale and glistening. I recognized the stance. It was the same figure I'd seen from the promenade, waiting, watching, smiling, without a mouth. I turned and ran, but the corridors stretched impossibly, twisting in ways that made no sense. Doors led to nowhere. Shadows clung to me, brushing my shoulders, whispering indistinctly. I realized then, the upper deck wasn't just a deck. It was a trap, a pocket of the ship where reality bent, and the crew, or whatever was behind this, controlled everything. Breathing hard, I ducked into one of the open doors, hoping for refuge. The room was empty, except for a single mirror cracked across its center. In it, I didn't see myself, only that hooded figure standing directly behind me, though when I spun around, the room was empty. I heard it again. The whisper carried on a windless draft. "You can't leave. Not yet." I had to get out. I had to warn someone. But every path seemed to loop back, the corridors folding like origami, doors appearing where they hadn't been moments ago. The ship was no longer the sea whisperer I had boarded. It had become a labyrinth, and I was prey. And then, a faint metallic clink echoed behind me, slow and deliberate, like a glass being set down. I froze. The sound was familiar. Too familiar. I turned and saw dozens of shadowed figures staring from the doors, hands raised, smiles unblinking. And at the end of the corridor, the hooded one, closer now, whispering, "Welcome to the real upper deck." My legs burned as I ran, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The corridor twisted again, folding in ways that defied physics. Doors opened and closed on their own, shadows slipping in and out of view. Every step echoed with whispers, sometimes a single word, sometimes a chorus of indecipherable murmurs. I stumbled into a room that looked like a lounge. Velvet chairs, polished wood, and a grand piano sitting in the corner. Everything appeared normal, except for the faint smell of brine and decay. A record played by itself, scratchy, warped. A waltz that should have ended decades ago. I took a tentative step forward. The piano keys pressed down by themselves in rhythm with the music. Then I saw them, passengers from earlier. Or at least, what was left of them. Eyes glazed, faces pale, smiles too wide. They raised glasses filled with dark liquid. Blood? I didn't want to know, and turned toward me, moving as if in slow motion. I backed away, bumping into a table. The record screeched and stopped. Silence, except for the whispers, now right in my ears. "Drink. Join us. It's too late to leave." A door slammed behind me. I spun around. The hallway outside wasn't the same. It stretched endlessly, the walls slick with seawater that rose and fell like tides. I felt the chill of it on my ankles. I realized I was standing on a deck that shouldn't exist, a layer between the living ship and something else, something drowned and sentient. Then the hooded figure appeared at the end of the hall, closer than ever, its head tilted unnaturally, voice a rasp inside my skull. "You found the way. Now you belong." I tried the door nearest me, but it opened onto the ballroom. Chandeliers swayed above, dripping water like rain. A crowd of passengers raised glasses in eerie unison, silent laughter echoing. The ones who had disappeared from the promenade and cabins, they were all here, part of the ship now. I backed toward the nearest staircase. It twisted upward, like it led nowhere, but I had no choice. I ran, slipping on wet steps. I glanced down. The hallway below was gone. Only black water stretched infinitely, reflecting the faint light of chandeliers that seemed suspended in a void. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a splash, followed by a hollow laugh. I reached the top deck again, breathless. The sun had set. The normal lights of the ship flickered like they were struggling to exist. The figure wasn't there, yet I could feel it, like a shadow on my back. I ran toward the open railing, hoping to signal someone, anyone, but the waves looked wrong. Too high, too dark, almost alive. I grabbed my radio and screamed for help. Static answered. Then a voice, calm, neutral. Maintenance reported an empty hallway, all passengers accounted for. I stared at the deck. No one, no crowd, no figure. Just the cold black ocean and the hum of engines that sounded wrong. I backed away, heart racing. My camera slipped, and when I picked it up, I saw the reflection in the lens. Hundreds of pale faces staring back from the upper deck corridor, smiling. I ran, and I haven't stopped running since. The ship is still out there. And I swear, at night, if you look closely at the upper deck from the promenade, you can see the lights flicker, the music plays. And sometimes, someone waves from the shadows, inviting you in. If you're listening, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. The fog rolled in thick and wet, hugging the deck like a living thing. I could barely see a few feet ahead, and the hum of the engines had grown louder, almost like a heartbeat. My hands were trembling as I gripped the railing, staring into the dark waters. Something beneath the surface moved, too fast, too deliberate, like it was waiting for me. Then I heard it, laughter, not soft or distant, but right behind me. I spun, flashlight shaking, and saw the figure again. Tall, hooded, its face still hidden, but the air around it vibrating with malice. The shadows behind it swirled unnaturally, forming vague shapes, passengers from my earlier encounters, half drowned, half human, their eyes glowing faintly. I stumbled backward. The deck warped, stretching as though the ship itself were bending. Doors and railings multiplied, confusing every instinct. I felt a hand on my shoulder, icy cold, and spun around. Nobody was there, but whispers filled my head. "You can't leave. You're ours now." I ran toward the main stairs, hoping to reach the top deck or signal someone. The stairs seemed endless. Every step echoed, yet no one else responded. Water began pooling around my feet, creeping higher with each movement. I realized then, the ship wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on fear, trapping souls. Ahead, the ballroom appeared through the mist. Chandeliers swayed violently, music blaring despite the storm. Drowned passengers emerged from the fog, their faces contorted into frozen smiles. One of them reached out, and I swear I could see the water dripping from their hair, forming letters, "Join US." A sudden gust threw me against the railing. I peered over, and the ocean wasn't there. Instead, a black void stretched endlessly, swallowing the horizon. I felt myself being pulled forward, gravity twisting unnaturally. The figure appeared beside me, leaning close enough for me to feel its cold breath. "You've come far. Don't resist," it whispered. I screamed and ran again, my flashlight illuminating the warped corridors. The same endless, flooded hallways from below deck appeared, doors opening on their own, revealing faces of people I had seen vanish. Each one beckoned me, dragging invisible hands across the air. My legs burned, but the pull grew stronger, like the ship itself wanted me inside. And then, silence. The fog lifted for a moment, revealing the top deck empty. No figure, no drowned passengers, just the hum of engines. Relief surged, but it was short-lived. In the reflection of the polished railing, I saw hundreds of pale faces behind me, grinning, mouths moving as if chanting. I didn't dare turn around. I grabbed a life preserver and dove overboard. The water hit me cold, shocking, but it felt alive, pulling at me. I kicked furiously, breaking the surface, gasping for air. I looked back, nothing, just the ship, eerily still, lights flickering in rhythm with a faint, warped waltz. I survived, somehow. But every night since, I wake up hearing that same music, that same laughter, and I swear, somewhere far away the ship still sails, waiting for the next passenger. If you're watching this, remember, Midnight Outcry only tells what we've verified, what's been recorded, but some things you'll never escape. The water is calm tonight, too calm, and I can hear the laughter again. Story 5. I assumed I was dreaming the first night I heard it. 3 gentle taps, a faint knock on the glass door leading to my balcony. I was startled awake by the sound since it was so clear and sharp in contrast to the ship's engine drone. I could see the faint glimmer of moonlight leaking around the edges of the heavy curtains when I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The most peculiar aspect, though, there was no balcony at my cabin. I'm a 34-year-old graphic designer from Portland, Oregon, and my name is Michael Harris. I had convinced myself that a week at sea would help me process the painful breakup that had led me to take this cruise. My friends would tell you that I'm more of a stay inside, order takeout, binge-watch Netflix kind of person than an adventurous one. However, I thought that the reduced package I saw online was a message that I needed something significant to get me out of that haze. I told myself, a fresh start. The ocean, some expensive pina coladas, and me. The ship was huge, a floating metropolis full of theaters, swimming pools, and endless hallways that seemed to be built to make you forget that there was nothing but open water all around you. My stateroom was intended to be internal, windowless, and balcony-free. It was to be economical, effective, and ideal for a single traveler. But I froze that first night when I heard those knocks and slipped the curtains open. In front of me, a balcony extended, railing made of steel, glass door that slides, 2 chairs and a little table. The moon shone silver on the ocean behind it. For what seemed like hours, I stood there trying to take it all in. I could still clearly recall the reservation details. There were no windows, no view, and unquestionably no balcony. I had the strange feeling that if I went outside, I might never return, and my chest constricted. I nearly persuaded myself that it had been a dream the following morning. However, sunshine was streaming across that same balcony when I woke up. Other balconies stretched down the ship's side in a tidy row, while the ocean glistened azure. Even though it didn't make logic, I made myself comply. I even tried to disregard the sensation that I was intruding on my own space by sitting outside with a cup of coffee. As the day wore on, things only became more bizarre. The steward who cleaned my cabin gave me a blank stare and claimed that my room was a interior stateroom, sir, when I asked him about the balcony. I laughed uneasily, assuming he was kidding, but his attitude remained the same. I made an effort to quietly discuss it with another couple at my table throughout dinner. I smiled and remarked, "Funny thing, my interior cabin somehow has a balcony." Both of them scowled. "That's not possible," she said, looking at her husband as if I were attempting a strange trick. "They don't even construct balconies inside cabins." I left the curtains open that evening. I noticed movement outside about midnight as the ship rocked softly. I initially assumed it was only the waves, reflection, but then I saw a figure. A man standing on the balcony railing, barefoot and drenched, as though he had climbed up from the water. His mouth opened into a smile too big for his face, and his skin gleamed in the moonlight. 3 taps on the glass were made with one hand raised. Press, press, press. Eyes wide, I staggered back and slammed against the dresser. The balcony was deserted when I looked again. Only the table, the railing, and the boundless sea. My heart refused to stop beating. I spent the remainder of the night awake. I started to doubt my sanity by the next morning. The woman behind the counter wrote on her keyboard and passed me a printed slip after I stammered something about structural mistakes and perhaps I was assigned the wrong cabin when I went down to guest services. 3175. Inside, no balcony. With a courteous smile that fell short of her eyes, she continued, "Everything looks correct on our end, Mr. Harris." I returned to my room with the intention of proving it to myself in some way. However, the air-conditioned airflow caused the drapes to softly sway as I opened the door. The balcony waited just beyond, and the borders were glowing with sunlight. The knocking came again that night. I didn't move this time. I laid in bed and forced myself to breathe quietly, as though I would be protected by feigning sleep. The knocks increased in volume and tenacity. Press, press, press. The boom reverberated into my bones, through the walls and through the glass. I closed my eyes and hoped that it would end. Then I heard a horrible sound. A moist, low laugh. I didn't get any sleep. Not a minute at all. As I sat on the edge of my bed, gazing out to the balcony, I heard the faint echo of that hollow, watery chuckle. My sensible intellect attempted to calm me down. Stress is the cause. You're by yourself. At night, the ocean teases us. However, the balcony was back and in fine condition when I pulled the curtains aside, and a figure that appeared to be recognizable was standing on the railing this time, hardly moving. Too much like home. I rubbed my eyes, my neck pricked with sweat. Slowly, deliberately, as though beckoning me, the apparition raised its hand. My initial reaction was to back off, but for some reason, whether it was curiosity, terror, or just simple incredulity, I moved closer. The railing then moved. It was longer than it ought to have been, the balcony growing slowly, unnaturally, like it was breathing. Behind me, my cabin appeared smaller, more squatty, and farther away. My feet made a creaking sound on the floors, but not the typical kind. Every step echoed against an unseen wall, sounding hollow and muted. My fingers scraped the railing as I staggered back. Below, the ocean reflected the moon like gleaming silver, too calm and unnaturally still. And hundreds of eyes gazed up from beneath the surface. Not fish, not reflections. Unblinking, pale human eyes that observe and follow. Behind me, there was a knock. Tap, tap, tap. I whirled. The door of my own cabin? Closed. Locked. However, the balcony itself was the source of the sound. I felt sick to my stomach. My legs would not let me run. I watched for hours as the ocean appeared to ripple, but not with water. While I leaned against the railing, the faces started to move. Rising slowly at first, hauling wet bodies onto the balcony floor from the depths. Of course, no one else could see them. Crew members conversed courteously with passengers as they passed in the corridors below, completely unaware of the scene on my floor. I made an effort to alert everyone. I let out a yell, hammered the walls. The steward who was strolling by simply nodded courteously, looked at his clipboard, and turned to leave, as though my fear were merely a small annoyance. Even the front desk was called. "There's a problem with my balcony." My voice was shaking as I spoke. Calm, almost bored, a clerk replied, "Your room is fine, sir. Stateroom inside. Enjoy your stay." It was simultaneously frightening and enraged. I moved away from the figures and the railing, but the sliding glass door disappeared as I backed away into the room. Where it had been minutes before, there was only a solid, smooth wall. I was in a panic. Anything I could use as a weapon. I grabbed the nightstand and opened the drawers. The balcony's water glistened strangely. A single figure came toward me. A grin too big, pale, wet. It gestured for me to come closer with a raised hand. My stomach turned over. In the window behind me, I could sense my own reflection moving differently, imitating me but purposefully delaying it. I tripped over the table and staggered back. Something squishy struck my foot. I froze, looking down. Not mine, but a pair of wet sneakers. The shoes vanished after a single step. Time became pliable. Hours felt like seconds, and minutes like hours. I kept thinking about every sound, every whispered chuckle, every pale face emerging from the sea, every tap on the railing. I felt like I was going crazy. Almost casually, I then discovered something that seemed inconceivable. There was another sliding door across the balcony. Another one. Not the one to my cabin. A door that wasn't there when I got there. Dim light flickered behind it. The shadows shifted. A faint sound of laughter and quiet, distorted music reverberated through the wall. My name was called by a voice. I froze, Michael, my own voice. Or one that was close enough to chill me. My legs wouldn't let me turn and run. I was dragged to the door by some perverse curiosity, or perhaps terror itself. I walked up slowly, my heart pounding. Amidst the tourist advice, I recalled reading in a cruise brochure that decks and corridors may shift slightly during heavy seas. Do not be alarmed. Heavy seas? I gave a sour laugh. Tonight there were no storms. There was nothing to explain the situation. Then, right behind my ear, I heard it. A whisper. I whirled and said, "Don't get too close, Michael." There was nobody on the balcony. The sea is tranquil. Below the surface, the faces disappeared. The railing was back where it had been. The flickering light on the second door is no longer there. I staggered back into my room, sweating and trembling. I tried to tell myself it was a delusion, but the loneliness was causing my mind to crack. However, I was unable to. Not totally. And I knew the balcony was waiting as I lay down that night and listened to the ship creak and the sound of the sea slapping against the hull, observing. Expanding. I had trouble falling asleep. Not at all. My gaze kept straying to the balcony just beyond the sliding glass door, and each time I blinked, it seemed to have shifted a little. More expansive. Longer. Not the same. I made an effort to tell myself that it was all in my head, but my gut told me otherwise. This ship had a serious problem. The typical ship noises, such as the distant hum of the engines, the hushed chatter in the hallways, and the clinking of dishes in the dining hall, had diminished for me by the third night. My cabin seemed to be encircled by a bubble of silence. In that silence, the balcony came to life. I stood there looking down at the water with my hands on the railing. Perfectly tranquil, the lake gleamed silver in the moonlight. But then I noticed activity below the surface. Faces. There are hundreds of them, mouths moving without sound, eyes wide open. Then they were climbing, which is impossible. Not only the previous pale figures, others. I knew some of them from the cruise. The couple who disappeared a few nights earlier from the buffet. An employee of the casino. Earlier in the day, I had spotted a toddler sprinting down the hallway. They were all silent, very wet, and staring at me as they carefully climbed onto the balcony. I fell backward and struck the wall. The smooth white wall was all that was left when the sliding door that I had been using as a lifeline vanished once more. I was confined. I hurried over to the phone and dialed guest services. I had trembling hands. Something is on the balcony. Folks, they're not living, are they? I yelled. It was a dead line. I tried again and slammed the receiver down. Still deceased. The figures on the balcony approached slowly, deliberately, and almost mockingly. Every face was a warped reflection of itself, drenched in white, smiling strangely. Even though there was a warm breeze outside, the air felt frigid against my skin now. Then there was a knock on the wall where the sliding door should have been, a sound I will never forget. 3 quick taps. Press, press, press. My chest tightened. It originated inside the wall. The balcony, no within. In the hopes that they wouldn't notice me, I fell to the ground and pressed my back against the wall in an attempt to blend in. The figures remained. Slowly they moved forward, crossing the balcony that now extended unreasonably far from my cabin. Their pale features were mirrored in the water below, not the moonlight. I recalled the urban legends about cruise ships with hidden decks, moving hallways, and non-existent rooms that I had read before boarding. They had made me laugh. But I get it now. I was caught in the clutches of this living ship. I could hear a faint whisper. I went cold. Neither the ocean nor the balcony was the source. I was thinking about it. Come with us. The voice was similar to mine, but slower and deeper. I felt sick to my stomach. Then I heard footsteps inside my chamber slapping wetly. Slow. Intentional. Just one step. 2 actions. Nearer. Nearer. Desperate, I scurried to the balcony. The railing had been extended yet more. forming an apparently infinite deck corridor. The individuals moved in my direction, their tongues moving in silent chanting, their hands grasping. In the lake below, I could see a mirror of myself, a Michael who wasn't me, smiling and calling out to me. The white wall was my back. Press, press, press. Each of the 3 knocks reverberated in perfect time. I was afraid to look. My breathing was labored. It pained how quickly my heart beat. Then I heard movement. The door. It was back. Dim, yet warm light poured through it. A member of the crew emerged, carrying a clipboard and strolling idly. "Inspection of the room," he said, smiling and quite normal. "Everything appears to be all right, sir. Is there a problem?" I felt like screaming. "Are they visible to you?" "Behind me? On the balcony? The others?" I yelled. He blinked. "Your balcony is excellent, sir. There have been no unusual reports. Maybe you're exhausted." I sank to the ground, shivering, knowing that no one else would witness it. No other person would accept it. The ship's reality had enveloped me, isolating me. Then I heard a voice behind me again, very faintly. Calling from the balcony was my own voice. "Michael," I said, unwilling to look. I had no desire to relocate, but I was aware that I would have to. Because I might never return to my own life if I didn't. I didn't get any sleep that evening, not even a moment. Every metal groan sounded like a warning. Every ship creak felt magnified. I leaned myself against the wall and stared out at the balcony, hoping it would stay motionless, and that the water below wouldn't mirror the unthinkable horrors I had seen. However, it didn't. The balcony was changed when I eventually made myself stand up, more expansive, longer. Its edges were twisted by impossible angles, giving the impression that it was a platform that stretched into space. I could see shadows moving beneath the clear water, extending upward, waiting. But the pale faces I had seen previously were not there, at least not completely. Then I caught sight of my duplicate. It was more than simply a glass reflection. It looked like me, drenched, with his hair stuck to his head, eyes wide, and that unnatural smile on his face. Slowly and deliberately, he held up a hand, signaling me to come forward. My feet felt stuck to the carpet, even though I wanted to run. My own reflection drifted away from me, mocking, taunting, and reflecting every thought I dared not express. I made an effort to shout, "This is not true! You're not genuine!" My voice was feeble and quickly lost in the ship's hum. Then I heard a slight noise behind me. It slid open, the sliding door that had come and gone at will. I could see the hallway through it. Silently, a passenger appeared, the one I had seen absent from the buffet days before. His eyes were dark, his face was blank, and he froze when he got to the balcony. Then a little, inhuman smile appeared on his face as he turned to face me. I took a step back. Press. 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 The weight that wasn't mine caused the railing to groan. Once more, faces emerged from the water, reaching in hundreds of pale shapes. My doppelganger took a step forward. I staggered back. The phone was on the nightstand when my hand touched it. "Hey!" "Safety!" I let out a shout into it. Not moving, just static. When I understood something important, I felt cold. The crew I had seen earlier was not present. The examination had been a ruse, a delay, a delusion. The ship itself now appeared to be alive, distorting time and space and warping reality in order to separate me. The brochure's statement, "Decks and corridors may shift slightly during heavy seas," came to mind once more. No storm. This was beyond explanation. The ship had the advantage, and I had been enticed. The ocean below the balcony shivered as I heard a sound I will never forget, a whisper that came from everywhere at once, saying, "Join us." Silent screams erupted from the pallid faces as their jaws opened wide. With a smile on her face, my doppelganger moved closer and held out her hand. With adrenaline pumping through my ears, my heart thumped. I wanted to escape, wanted to jump back into the cabin, but that white, smooth wall had taken the place of the door once more. My heartbeat was matched by the slight echo of the balcony railing taps. Press, press, press. Each one is more intimate than the others. I made a decision. I took a step forward. Despite my knowledge that it shouldn't have, the railing seemed incredibly sturdy under my fingers. Behind him, the water had swirled into a mirror of white faces, all reaching higher, quiet, unrelenting, and my counterpart was standing there, smiling. All of my instincts told me to turn and run, but there was nowhere to go. Just the balcony, extending into thin air. I tentatively moved forward. It was precisely reflected by my twin, who made exaggerated and purposeful movements. His voice was mine, but distorted and hollow. "Michael, come on forward, join us." I felt sick. All of the missing people were suddenly visible to me, beckoning, mute, and blank-eyed as they emerged from the sea onto the balcony. I was able to identify their features, clothes, and snippets of their final moments on the ship. Some clawed at the railing as they reached for me, while others extended their unnaturally long hands. I faltered. I almost fell into the clear water below when my foot slipped. However, the surface trembled, and rather than drowning, I caught a vision of dozens of trapped copies of myself, each of whom was silently screaming beneath the reflection. Despite my desire to fight and resist, the draw was too strong. The double smile grew uncontrollably. Almost reflexively, I held up a shaky hand to him. Then I caught a glimpse of the door flickering in the corner of my eye. A dim glow emerged, hardly perceptible through the white wall. Even if it wasn't much, it was sufficient to remind me that I had options. My heart pounded. Could I get there? Return to the real world? Or would I be imprisoned indefinitely? Merely another pallid reflection on a non-existent ship's balcony. With all my strength, I sprinted toward the glowing door. My hand was reached for by the duplicate. Press, press, press. The railing trembled wildly. My head was filled with mute screams as the faces below sprung upward, their jaws wide. A hand seized my wrist. Something chilly, but not my doubles. I had trouble. Once more, my foot slid. The balcony tilted strangely, stretching farther than it should have. My vision became hazy. Passengers, reflections, and incarnations of myself were all pressed closer by the faces from the water. I woke up on the floor of my cottage, gasping, heart thumping. The balcony had vanished. Only the empty wall where the sliding door was supposed to be. Through a small porthole, sunlight came in. I was by myself. However, I saw it, the reflection on the screen, when I grabbed for the phone to contact guest services. Even though I hadn't moved, my own face, which was damp and pale, was grinning back at me. Wet tracks were slightly pressed into the carpet fibers behind me, but they led nowhere. I have 3 more nights on this ship. The balcony is no longer there, but occasionally I hear the taps when the moon is high and the motors are humming softly. Press, press, press. In the back of my mind, I also know that it's still waiting. Please take a moment to subscribe to Midnight Outcry if you're listening. It helps preserve stories like these. I can't help but wonder, was it real? Or am I already stuck waiting for the next Michael to replace me, somewhere between the balcony and the ocean?